so, when is Feng Shui first recorded in history?
Feng Shui as a term, I think, derives from the Song dynasty, which is 960 to 1279. But before that, there's Kanyu, Dili, precursors like prehistoric versions. Feng Shui as an activity is probably about 2,000 years old.
What are the roots of Feng Shui?
It comes down two lines, if you like. And again, this is not written, but it appears to come down two lines. One line is through the Book of Changes. So we have a line that comes from the diviners of the Zhou dynasty about 1000 BC, which gives us the Book of Changes, yin and yang, those ideas, hexagrams, trigrams, okay? And there's another line of descent which comes down through kind of proto-Taoists, probably a little bit further, earlier perhaps Shang dynasty, which is 1,000 years or so earlier perhaps, where they develop these ideas of the animals representing particular time periods.
Who were the main practitioners of Feng Shui in its, so to speak, formative years?
As Master Shen, who was publishing at the beginning of the 20th century, has been incredibly influential in terms of what's called flying star, which is about 10 pockets of energies that don't last forever. The sort of authority is Yang Yong Song, who dates from the changeover time between the Tang and the Song dynasty around 1000 AD. Those are the kind of legendary names.
And if you were allowed to just identify three modern day current world leading practitioners of Feng Shui, which three names would you pick?
Well, I tend to think of Raymond Low, Feng Shui Low, who's a Hong Kong national, who's a lovely middle-aged man, as the gold standard. He's also a Neil Young fan. I talk with him about guitars. Joey Yap is probably the industry standard. Joey Yap is the greatest educator in Feng Shui, probably the best known Feng Shui man in the world. Absolutely brilliant. There are others. I think probably, I would say Master Mas Kahatum, who's a Thai Chinese. I'd say he is probably the one who has influenced me most. And if I can go to four, Master Chan Kanwa, to whom I owe everything in this regard.
And in terms of current day practitioners and teachers and perhaps leaders in the field, who else would you cite as being an example of that outside of perhaps China?
Well, probably the Western authority most respected by Chinese Feng Shui practitioners. In fact, the only one is Derek Walters, with whom I studied Bazi, who wrote the handbook in Chinese astrology and is an extraordinary man and has been very generous to me.
Where did Feng Shui originate from?
Well, it starts showing up in Chinese art, engravings I guess, where there are pictures dating back to the Han, so slightly BC, of geomancers putting sticks in the ground so as to measure the shadows against the time of day and therefore the direction and so on. That's going back perhaps 2,000 years. So in China, perhaps that sort of time, but the roots go back 3,000–4,000 years earlier than that. The traditional roots are with a Chinese folk hero, if you like, called Fuzi, who's supposed to have brought agriculture and a whole load of other things. There are authorities who say they weren't Chinese, and the origins actually go much further west. In fact, the first recording of the Chinese astrological terms, you know, rat, rooster, dog, horse, and so on, is in Turkic, which is considerably further west.
How long would it take a beginner to become proficient? As a beginner?
Proficient is a movable feast, and it is something that an individual judges for themselves. Some people walk into my classes competent already in terms of their approach. All they need is information. Some people never get it.
And how would you answer that for an intermediate?
You would study basic Feng Shui, flying stars, Xuangong Dagua, for 3, 4, 5 years, perhaps longer. You would have a continuing relationship with a master or a grandmaster, and you would get to intermediate, maybe in a matter of years.
And if someone presented themselves to you and said, "Hello, my name is Sam.
Yep.
I am classed as an advanced practitioner of Feng Shui."
Yes.
Essentially, what experience would you expect them to have to warrant that title or label or
I
description?
expect them to have a low pan and to be able to read every character on it. Very complicated, very beautiful thing, but has several thousand characters on it. So I expect them to be masters of their own low pan. There are different sorts of low pans. The serious Feng Shui is based on the Chinese compass.
Being able to speak Mandarin or Cantonese, if that's the case, to what extent or not is that necessary?
To speak it, I don't think necessary at all. I don't speak Mandarin or Cantonese. I don't speak tonal languages. I haven't got enough time in this lifetime to devote to that. And Feng Shui is a universal thing. It is not about Chinese culture ultimately. But to be able to read Chinese, classical Chinese, and to write it to a great extent is essential.